worry. How will you keep transparency in your office?
Sure. And I think that's one thing that I'm really focused on in this race is to bring accountability and transparency back to the office because I don't ever want anyone to think for 1 minute that something was done behind closed doors.
Well, welcome back to the A-List with Angie Merton, special candidate edition. This is our special candidate edition where I'm sitting down with the people that are asking to lead Galveston County. Today, we're joined with Jennifer Ott, who's a candidate for district attorney. The DA's office plays a critical role in public safety, deciding which cases move forward and how victims are supported and how justice is carried out across our courts. With voters preparing to make an important decision, I'm talking directly with the candidates about their experiences, their priorities, and their visions for this office. Jennifer Ott, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, to start us off, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and your family?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised on Galveston Island, and we actually...
You're a BOI?
I am a BOI. We moved to League City until I was about 7, and then I went back to Galveston and lived there. But I've always had a special place in my heart for League City, and I also live here now with my family. I'm married to an educator, and I have a daughter who's 16 and a stepdaughter who's 19. And so we've enjoyed living here in League City. As far as professional experience, I actually have been working for Galveston County and Galveston County residents as an attorney for a little over 22 years. 18 of those years, I was at the Galveston County District Attorney's Office. I left there in 2022 and then opened my own practice for a little bit and then started back with the Galveston County Misdemeanor Mental Health Public Defender's Office. So I've been serving the community as a public servant for many, many years here.
So for our viewers that don't really know what the district attorney's office does, I think there's always some confusion about all of these positions. Give us a little bit of overview of what the district attorney's office does. And do you have any insight on why this is an elected position? Because a lot of people are confused on why it's not like a police position.
Right. So as far as the DA's office, and you're going to hear people call assistant district attorneys and prosecutors, they're the same thing. I've had people actually say, I didn't realize that was the same thing. But the DA's office is in charge of prosecuting every crime in our county. And that's everything from Class B misdemeanors, and some Class Cs, but also all the way up to capital felonies. So it's a wide range of crimes that we are tasked to prosecute. And so the DA's office, their job is to see that justice is done and to make sure that the laws of the state in the United States Constitution are followed. But it is probably the most important position that we have in our county because at the end of the day, the DA's office is the one that decides whether or not somebody is actually prosecuted because we get those cases after somebody's been arrested. And I think the reason why it was an elected position is because of the importance of what that position actually entails. And you're in charge of, close to 45 prosecutors on a daily basis who would be your assistant DAs. They're the ones that typically are your line prosecutors that go into court and make sure that they're ready for trial. They do plea bargains. They are screening cases. And so I believe that's probably why it's an elected position because it is so important to our community.
Well, I think that what some people think is that if it's an elected position, then you're always running, you're always worried about politics, are there favors involved? When politics are involved, people worry about the integrity of it. Now, I will say that your integrity has been impeccable for anybody. I interview a lot of people to find out the questions they'd like asked. So I think that that's a great thing that's been said about you. But it is a worry. How will you keep transparency in your office?
Sure. And I think that's one thing that I'm really focused on in this race is to bring accountability and transparency back to the office. Because I don't ever want anyone to think for 1 minute that something was done behind closed doors. Obviously, there are things that have to be done behind closed doors because you can't show everybody evidence. But what I mean by that is I don't want anybody to ever think that there's any sort of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type situation. Exactly. Because at the end of the day, the minute the DA's office loses that integrity, we've lost all of the community's faith and trust in us. And I unfortunately feel like that's kind of happened in the past. And that is why one of my major tenets is to bring that accountability and integrity back to the office.
Well, and obviously we want criminals off the streets.
Absolutely.
But we don't want people who aren't criminals in jail.
Right.
So, we hear a lot of I'm tough on crime, and that's great. But how do you also do victim rights and make sure that the rights of the people that are accused? Because obviously not everyone's guilty.
Right. So I actually have been working defense work the last few years, which really opened my eyes. When I left in 2022, I never in a million years thought I'd do defense work, but I also knew I wanted to stay here in Galveston County because it's my home. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to stay here, stay around the judges, the police officers, and everybody I'd worked with for the last 18 years, and really kind of get a better understanding of the entire system. And I feel like that's really put me at a good advantage because I really do know now how the whole process can work together, whether it be bonds, whether it be, having people put into jail, arrests, all the things that I didn't think about as a prosecutor necessarily, other than maybe setting a bond or recommending a bond. Right. But I never knew how you got somebody out of jail. But I think I have that full grasp of how the entire criminal justice system works. And I think that's going to be very good for me in the future for the office. But yes, I mean, ultimately, everybody's rights need to be upheld. And have always been a huge victims' rights advocate. I think victims are the most important part of our position. Obviously, right there up top is if you're guilty of a crime, then you need to be held accountable for it. But I also, as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, and just as a law-abiding citizen, you want to make sure everybody's rights are upheld. And sometimes it's hard because you'll get somebody really bad in there and you're like, I know this person probably did this, but maybe something was wrong with the evidence and you can't prove it. But being a good prosecutor shows that you look at that evidence, you can't use that evidence. You're not going to try to put it in front of a judge or a jury because you're following the laws of the state of Texas and the Constitution. And that's what our foundation was built upon.
So we're talking about how would you keep transparency
Sure.
in that office. So we did have a case not too long ago where there was somebody that's in that judicial system that was brought forth on charges and they were dropped. Mm-hmm. So I think that, sometimes people that hold offices in the county or the cities do things wrong. So how can you make sure that transparency, again, if it's, you said, no, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours
Right.
kind of thing. But people are going to be looking with a microscope
Absolutely.
on how you handle an official case that comes before you of an official.
Right.
So how would you handle that so that you make sure that people that have, important jobs are also prosecuted if they need to be?
I want people to look at those cases with a microscope. I hope that they do. I actually was the chief of the public integrity division at the office the last 5 years I was there. So my job was to investigate any type of case dealing with public corruption, any sort of excessive force cases, officer involved shootings, in custody deaths, things of that nature. So those are the types of cases that kind of need to be looked at with a microscope. And so I will say this, I expect a lot of questions of me. I will answer any question that anybody poses to me because at the end of the day, when I'm elected, I work for the people. I don't work for anybody else other than the people. And so if the people have a question, I have an open door policy. People are going to have my phone number. I want them to know that I don't mind talking to them. Am I going to make mistakes? Absolutely. I'm human. But at the same time, I want everybody to know that I'm easy to talk to. I'll answer any questions I can. And so that's how I hope to, lead with transparency and accountability.
You said earlier that the DA oversees like 45 or so prosecutors. How do you stay involved in the cases? Like, how do you know what's going on in each case when there's so many?
Well, and I don't think it's possible to know what's going on in each case. I think a DA should definitely be involved in any of the major cases. And I'm not talking about just high profile, but, when I was in public integrity, I went straight to the DA and the first assistant. So the first assistant's kind of like the vice president, right? And so they're the second in command. I went straight to them with any questions I had. I think that's something that the DA needs to be, definitely in the loop on. Additionally, I think any capital murders, any murders, also high profile cases, they need to be made aware of. The way we did that when I was in the office was, if I was on call, because I was an on-call DA for about 16 of those years that I was there, if I got a call at 3:00 in the morning and it was a murder, then I was texting the DA and the first assistant, hey, I'm going to let you know in the morning kind of what's happening.
So, how is the district attorney in charge of the hiring of all those people?
Correct.
So that you're trusting the people
Absolutely.
that are underneath you. I mean, of course, you're probably going to want to keep people. They have experience. You want to trust all of the predecessors that hired those people, but it is the DA who's responsible for hiring and firing of those people.
At the end of the day, yes, ma'am. And so the way that works, though, is you typically have people on your hiring committee that also have a lot of experience. Unfortunately, in 2022, a lot of experience walked out the door. I think that we lost about 122 years of prosecutorial experience back in 2022. And so I've talked to people that are ready and willing to come back because I really, I respect these prosecutors that are in the office. I want them to have the guidance and the experience and the teachings that I was given when I was a young prosecutor. And it's kind of hard to do when you're just in a constant loop of being in trial and doing all this. And when you don't have a lot of people with experience that are able to help you through those, trials and tribulations, if you will.
Right.
And so I'm hopeful that I can have people come back that are really going to be able to focus with the prosecutors on, just some basic things, but some things that just they may have not learned because they didn't know any better, and whoever was there didn't know any better. Additionally, I hope that I'd have people come back that are going to help me with law enforcement to rebuild those relationships, because unfortunately those have been lost. And I'm sure you can figure if law enforcement and the DA's office aren't really getting along, it really doesn't, it's not good for our community. And I'm not saying they're fighting or anything like that, but I think
it's a
unfortunately
symbiotic relationship
from what I've been told, there's a lot of law enforcement that's just not happy with the way the DA's office is being run, which,
On that, I did have a question about,
Yeah.
so how do you plan to work with law enforcement and victim advocates to ensure decisions reflect both public safety and victims' rights? Because you have to work.
Oh, it's a hand-in-hand situation. And like you just said, it's symbiotic because a lot of your cases are victim cases. The one thing that, like I said earlier, that I've always been a victim advocate. I think that the victims need to be reached out to almost, within 48 hours after something happens. And also, that's also dependent on how many cases like that are coming in. I mean, it's not going to be a bright line, but I think you need to have some things in place there that they're not ever feeling like they're not being reached out to from somebody from my office. I'm hopeful that the police agencies are also reaching out to them, but if not, at least it gives them a line to us. As far as the police agencies, I have spent my entire career building relationships with these agencies. And in fact, when I left in 2022, I was in public integrity, like I said, for 5 years. So I should have been probably the most hated prosecutor in the office because I'm potentially prosecuting police officers. But I felt like, and I've been told that I walked out of that office with even more respect by the law enforcement community than I had before. And a lot of my law enforcement friends were like, we didn't think that could be possible, but you did, which I think is why I have so many municipal police associations actually endorsing me. And so I've had Galveston Municipal Police Association, Lamarck Police Association, Santa Fe Municipal Police Association, and Dickinson Police Association have just all endorsed me, which mean a ton to me because those are the guys and gals on the streets. They're the ones that are doing the hard work and the heavy lifting. So, so that means a lot to me.
Well, that's one thing that's important for voters to know. We don't know the ins and outs of what your old job would have been. So maybe say they're like, why is so-and-so not endorsing her? And you might go, well, that's because the relationship that they had to have because of her old job, keeping them in line. Or, it's nice to look and see, oh, that's why maybe this isn't happening or this is happening. But how wonderful that they had that respect to, because I think that all in all, police officers want police officers to be held accountable if they're doing something bad.
Correct.
They don't want bad cops. They don't want dirty cops, and they want to be associated with a program within the city that supports them being good. Because that's what they're promoting in their life. That's what they're giving their life to is being a good cop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, we had a case in Galveston County where a rideshare driver was arrested or charged with kidnapping and assault. And the DA's office decided not to prosecute when video evidence surfaced that changed something about the original case. But it was controversial. So, of course, we don't get to see, why it was controversial or why people would have thought maybe it wasn't cut and dry. And I don't want to know, what that is. But with everything that's going on in like Minneapolis and I'm not talking about just the ICE stuff. I'm saying the video evidence itself. Everybody's walking around with a video camera in their pocket all the time. I mean, unfortunately, instead of giving CPR, people are taking out their video cameras and videotaping it. But we're going to have a lot of video evidence. From now on, it's probably going to be happening more and more and more. But I think that we all know that one view from a video camera is different from another view from a video camera. I think that we saw that with the Good shooting in Minneapolis, that there's so many different views.
So many different angles.
Every different angle shows you something else, and it can't be decided in 5 seconds. You saw that one video and you're like, down with the, ice or whatever. And then you see the other one and you're like, oh, wow, she hit him, I mean, so how is it going to be possible to utilize that to decide whether or not you prosecute or don't prosecute here to forevermore.
Right. Because we are going to get more and more. One thing that we never want to put out there is we want people to give us all of that evidence. I know a lot of people were concerned that maybe some people weren't turning over their cell phone cameras and things of that nature. But the more evidence we have, the better it is that we're equipped to understand what really happened and what really transpired. And it kind of goes back to my public integrity days, because a lot of times I might have looked at some sort of officer involved shooting body cam that night and went, ugh, I don't know about this one. But then once I actually, and my investigator would slow it down to milliseconds on milliseconds on milliseconds, then you actually kind of see how everything transpires. And it's tedious, don't get me wrong. But sometimes, not sometimes, the justice system should be tedious because we are potentially, holding somebody's liberty, in the palm of our hands, or holding justice for a victim in the palm of our hands. So it is a huge, it's something so big that I think a lot of people don't quite understand how important your DA's office is. So you want people, and sometimes it takes a lot longer than people want it to take. But at the end of the day, no prosecutor wants somebody who's not guilty to be convicted of a crime. And every prosecutor wants somebody who's guilty to be convicted of a crime if they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Because, we do have that burden.
So, most of us know about a DA's office from a television show.
Correct.
I mean, so who knows what's a right representation, what's a wrong representation. When I was in journalism school, one of the things that they teach you is, if you're going to put something out there that's absolutely false, then it needs to be so obvious that it's a parody or a,
satirical,
or whatever.
Right?
Because people see something and hear it, they think it's true.
Correct.
Well, now with the internet, anybody can put out a news story. Anybody can have a blog.
Let's not talk about AI, right?
That's right. But just of course that wasn't even, I'm old, so, back when I was in school, that that wasn't even a thing.
Well, I went to journalism school too, just FYI.
Yeah. So that you can't have a first annual. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I do. I do know that.
But what I'm saying is, like, the things that we see from television, that's what we think is right. That's what we know. Who knows? But what we see is the evidence, the chain of evidence, and those kind of things. Making sure you see so many cases that failed because of the chain of evidence was broken or done incorrectly or whatever. There's a local abuse shelter here that I worked with, and the first thing you have to do before you volunteer there is take a tour, and they have a scientific rape recovery room, and they say that if you ever know anybody that was raped, send them to this. It's Bridge Over Troubled Waters, actually. Send them there because their collection never is touched by anybody but one person. One person. It's not in a hospital where there's, doctors and nurses and passing in a
potentially
lab
different
and all of that.
chains of custody.
But that, I don't know if all abuse shelters, but I know that the Bridge did, and just their explanation of how many cases are ruined because the evidence is ruined, and that just touched my heart so bad. Just like going rape is already a victim shaming kind of event, so the evidence is the most important thing that you have. And if it can be tainted so easily, I actually had a note on, so I said, I know Galveston County has a victims assistance division that offers resources for victims and families, but awareness and outreach vary. What will you do as DA to make sure victims, especially in serious crimes, are supported and informed throughout the court process?
Right. So I think, like I said a little earlier, one of my biggest things that I want to make sure is brought back to the DA's office, and I'm not taking anything against this victims assistance coordinators because they're amazing. They've just got a lot of work on their hands, unfortunately. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we get the line prosecutors to talk to the victims fairly quickly after this happens because, victims get scared. Victims don't understand the system because ultimately this is the first time they've ever been part of the criminal justice system. And it's and they've just gone through something traumatic. Right. So it's very confusing. I've always was a prosecutor that got a hold of my victims as soon as I could and walked them through the process and explained to them the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes you don't know the ugly until later on in the game, but you have to. And I would always tell my victims, look, you're not going to like what I have to say sometimes, but I'm never going to let you walk out of here and look me in the eye and say, you know what, Jennifer, you never told me about that. You never told me that was a possibility. I wouldn't have done this or I wouldn't have done that, because I always wanted them to be informed. Trial prep is huge with victims because they're scared. They're going in and potentially facing an abuser or somebody that sexually assaulted them. Or even worse, a child who's having to go in for a child abuse case. So those are things that I definitely want to bring back to the office to make sure we have people, even prosecutors, that are trained in how to talk to victims and how to walk them through this difficult process. And that can be done. It's not impossible. I was taught how to do it. And I have victims that still call me, that I've had victims show up to my campaign parties because, they trust me and they know me. They're supporting me. I have, victims of crimes that still reach out to me every Christmas just to tell me Merry Christmas. And it might have been 15 years ago when I tried their loved one's case, but
you just don't think about that, because obviously the first contacts is going to be somebody they're going to grab onto for support, if you're supportive,
right?
And, if you're caring for them and informative to them, that's going to be such a great outcome for
and
them.
A comfort.
I think that how do we get people to know? Come forward now, like while there's still evidence on you,
right.
While there's still stuff. It's how many people go home and take a shower or whatever if they've been
right.
attacked or because just abuse, evidence is on your body,
right?
And if you wait weeks, and I know they're scared and whatever, but if they can know that the district attorney, the police, they're all there for them,
right?
And
I think that goes through, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that kind of goes through like education and educating the prosecutors, educating the police officers. This is how we need to deal with this, and making victims feel like they can be comfortable around those people, because, if nobody wants to talk about the most horrible thing that's ever happened to them in their life, but for them to understand, hey, I've heard about this. I know that they have victims coordinators over there, or I've heard that the DA's office is there for me. I've heard that the police agencies are there for me. And that, I think, just becomes, it comes across when you educate the community about what we're here for, whether it be police agencies, the DA's office, what the DA's office has to offer. But I definitely think that the community needs to be aware of really what all the DA's office does, because the community really isn't.
Right.
Because
that's what I said at the beginning. Nobody knows.
Luckily, and the reason that they don't know it is because they've been lucky and never had to deal with the criminal justice system on one side or the other, right? So, I have always made sure that in all the prosecutors I kind of came up with, we were taught, you don't ever want them to feel alone. And so there have been nights where I've been on the phone with a victim till 2:00 in the morning because I'm just trying to calm them down. And that's okay for me. I'm okay with that. It's part of my job.
And I think that as a district attorney, there's probably a trickle down effect of the personality of, if the district attorney is very strict and very stern and very, we want you all to be by the book. It's law. We want you to be by the book.
Right.
But if the personality is stern, I bet that's a trickle down effect as well. So if there's somebody who's come up in the system and has that caring, I would hope that would be a trickle down as well, because as district attorney, you're going to be the public face.
Right.
So, we may hopefully never meet any of the assistant DAs, but the DA is a little more public.
Right.
You are, all in all, it's a political position. So you probably will have a more public face.
Right.
But while you were talking, we were saying nobody does that. Most of us don't know what's available because luckily most of us are law-abiding citizens that have never been arrested or have no idea what's in the judicial system.
Right. Yeah. Or you've been lucky and not been a victim of a crime. Right.
I do have one, one thing that I don't want to say it's a victimless crime, because drugs is... the surrounding of selling of drugs does very often get violent and those kind of things. But all in all, the addicts themselves very often, are not violent. It's themselves they're wanting to hurt, So I was told by a local judge that we always push for rehabilitation. So when somebody's arrested, even if it's a felony drug offense, they want them to get rehabilitation and not jail, because they're an addict, not a criminal, even though they are a criminal. So is that true? And what processes are out there for something like a drug addict that may even continually get arrested?
So the good thing that started a few years back in Galveston County, and I have to thank the commissioners and the commissioner's court and the county judge for this, but everybody realized that there was definitely a need for specialty courts in our county. So we have several specialty courts. We have a veterans specialty court. So if you're a veteran dealing with PTSD, you pick up some sort of crime, you potentially could go into veterans court. But with your question, we have a drug court, Hope Drug Court, and then we also have a mental health court, because as you can kind of believe, and we've started to learn more, mental health and drugs sometimes correlate with one another. So and you're going to have dual diagnoses, right? So there's also a mental health court that also deals with drugs as well, and those are actually pretty stringent probations. So you ultimately you plead to a deferred probation, and it depends on what the charge is. You're talking about drugs. They're not typically letting aggravated robbers in those. Right. But people who have drugs or other low level crimes are going to probably go in those courts, and they really focus on the addiction, or if it's mental health and addiction, focusing on trying to get their medications balanced and things of that nature. And they've been very successful. And I've had several actual clients who've gone through them and done really well in them. And I'm super proud of them for doing that, because it's hard. Yeah. But as far as, trying to make sure, and it kind of also talks about like what my job is now, it's just misdemeanors and mental health. But, we're trying to help get these defendants into programs, into Gulf Coast Center, making sure they get medicated. Part of their bond conditions is to go to Gulf Coast Center, make sure that they take their medication. And if not, they could go back to jail if not. So we're really trying to set them up for services, because that way, hopefully that criminal trespass doesn't turn into a burglary of a habitation later, right? So, but we only deal with misdemeanors, but the county has done a really good job with these specialty courts. So,
yeah, because we were saying, like, hopefully none of us ever are going to need the services of the district attorney, but these are people that we love, people that are in our families, and
we all know somebody,
and you all know you're like, they need help. So I loved when that judge told me that it's always rehabilitation that we're trying to push. Now, if it's a repeat offender, does it follow? Like, does a certain assistant DA kind of follow with that person, or the judge? Do they go to that court, or does it just matter where they were arrested?
It just usually matters what court it gets filed into. But if it's a repeat offender, the prosecutors are going to have access to that criminal history. So they'll be able to say, okay, this person's been to the pen a ton of times. But we kind of use that too, especially in drug cases, to say, okay, this is your one shot. Like, we can put you in drug court. It's going to be stringent, but it's either that or prison,
Yeah.
And there's
scared straight.
Right, yeah. But, a lot of times that's what they need, and they know they need it, and they've hit rock bottom, and it's time for them to do something different than what they've been doing, because all they've been doing is ended up back in prison. So, like I said, we've had a lot of success with it. And, but as far as the prosecutor, I know they have prosecutors assigned to drug court, mental health court, but I don't necessarily know if they follow them, if they pick other cases.
Because you kind of want to know the continuity of, helping them.
Yeah. And the good thing about the DA's office in Galveston County is we are kind of small enough that it's, people know what's going on. And if I look it up and go, oh, that case was out of this court, let me go talk to that prosecutor who was in this court 2 years ago. Maybe she can tell me about this person.
So, well, we're way over, because we have so many no, my fault. So many interesting things. But finally, just tell me, why should Galveston County voters trust you as their next district attorney? And what's the core difference in your approach to the status quo?
Right. So, as I said earlier, I am the only one in this race that has actually worked in the office. I worked in the office for over 18 years. I actually interned there 21 years before that, and realized that it was my heart and passion to do the job that I'm doing and want to do for the community. I've spent my entire career working for Galveston County. I understand that this is a political position, but I'm not a politician. I'm a prosecutor at heart. And so I want to make sure that everyone is treated fairly and given justice in all of our cases that we deal with in Galveston County. And I also want people to understand that the DA's office is there for them. You know, we serve the public at the end of the day because we're public servants. And so I hope nobody ever has to call me up. But if you do, I'm there, or somebody in my office would be there. I want to make sure that the DA's office gets that integrity back and is held, is shown to be held accountable for things and be transparent. And so I think with my experience and my drive and passion for that office and the community, I just hope that I can count on everybody's vote come March 3rd in the primary. Early voting starts February 17th. But you can check out my website at oughtforda.com if you want any more information about my background, because I know we got busy talking.
Is there a contact on there where they can actually get to you?
Yes, absolutely. And it's OTT, the number 4, DA at .com. And then that can give you my email address and my phone number and everything else. And I am, like I said, an open book. Feel free to call me. I'll love to answer any questions anybody has.
All right. Her phone number's on there, so you can talk to her. All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer, so much for being
this
here.
Was great.
So Jennifer Ott for District Attorney. Now, remember, you as a voter are the voice of the future. You choose the future that we're going to have here in Galveston County, in America. So don't just sit at home and not get to know your candidates. Get to know your candidates, pick the ones that have the voice that you associate with, and go to the polls and get your voice heard. Help choose the future of your county. So thanks for coming and joining the A-List by Angie Merton, Special Candidate Edition. We'll see you next time.